next problem is Kingston Company provides following information. We have the standard information for the material and the labor. We have actual information for material labor. It also tells us how many units were actually produced. And the questions are wanting us to calculate the material price variance, material quantity, labor rate, and labor efficiency. So basically, in order to answer these 4 questions, we've just got to set up our 3 columns again. So we'll start off and go with direct material to start with. So to answer 7 and 8, we're looking for direct material. We need to use our 3 columns, actual price times actual quantity, standard price times actual quantity, and then the 3rd column is standard price times the standard quantity. So we're looking for materials. We want to look at the actual. So we're going to focus here on this middle line. It tells you that 8,700 feet were used and 9,000 feet were purchased. Now remember, occasionally the material quantities can be different, okay? So you could purchase material and use a different amount. If this is the case, okay, so make a note. For direct material, you want to use used for the usage variance, and you want to use purchased for the price variance, which makes sense if you think about it. Purchased, price. Used, usage. Okay? So let's start off and we'll do column 1 and column 2. So we know that this is the price variance, right? The difference between column 1 and column 2 is your price variance. So we want to use the material for the actual quantity. We want to use the actual material that was purchased. So we purchased 9,000 feet at $4.50 each. So the $4.50 each is the actual price. The actual quantity is 9,000 feet. So that gives you $40,500. Then we want to fill in column number 2. We want the standard price. How much did we think we were going to have to pay for that material? We come up here to the standard and it says that we should have paid $4.20. Actually purchased 9,000. So if we do 420, so if we do 420 times 9,000, that's going to give you $37,800. So your variance, difference between column 1 and column 2, is going to give you the price variance, and your difference here is $2,700. So we have a $2,700 direct material price variance, and we have to say whether it's favorable or unfavorable. We're focusing on the prices. We thought we'd pay $4.20 for the material. We actually had to pay $4.50 for the material. We had to pay more, so that means it's an unfavorable variance. Now, maybe we had to pay more because we bought a higher quality. We don't really know. That could be a potential reason for, but nonetheless, it gives us an unfavorable price variance. Now we want to do the usage variance. Now, to do the usage variance, we're looking at column 2 and column 3 again. However, now we're having to change the material for the actual quantity. Okay, so now to do the usage variance, the actual quantity is going to change because now we want to use the material that was used. So your standard price is still $4.20, but now for the usage variance, instead of using the material purchased, now we want to use the material that was actually used, which is only 8,700 feet. So if I do 8,700 feet times $4.20, that is going to give me $36,540. Then we fill in for the 3rd column with your standard price, again, is still $4.20. Now we want to fill in standard quantity. How much material should we have used? So again, this is the tricky part. You want to take your standard quantity per unit. So we think it should have only taken 3 feet a unit. So take your standard quantity per unit and multiply it by the actual units produced. So basically what we're saying is that when we make 2,750 units, we should have put 3 feet into each unit. So we should have used, okay, so if I multiply this together, we should have used 8,250 feet of material. So that is going to be your standard quantity times the $4.20. So that gives you $34,650 subtract that from the 36,540. That's going to give you a material usage variance of 1,890, and it's going to be unfavorable. Because again, if you look in the parentheses here, if you take 2750 times 3, this is how much material we thought we should have used. We should have used 8,250 feet, but we actually used 8,700. We used more. That's bad. So that gives you an unfavorable usage variance. So to fill in your answer choices, the first one's asking for material price. So your material price is 2,700 unfavorable. And for 8, it's asking you for the material quantity variance. So your quantity variance is 1,890 unfavorable. 9 and 10 want us to do the same thing for labor. We're looking for labor rate and labor efficiency. So you want to write down your 3 columns again. So for direct labor, we want to fill in actual. So for labor, your actual price is $7.90. And your actual quantity is 7,000 direct labor hours. So that's 55,300. Then you take your standard price. So for standard, we thought we would only have to pay $7.50 per hour. So that's your standard price times the actual hours worked of 7,000. So that gives you $52,500. Now we can take the difference between the 2 columns, and that gives you a $2,800 difference. So you've got a $2,800 labor rate variance. To figure out if it's favorable or unfavorable, you can simply compare the AP and the SP. So we thought the SP, we thought we should pay $7.50 an hour. We actually paid $7.90 an hour. We had to pay more. That's bad. So that's an unfavorable variance. So you have an unfavorable direct labor rate variance of 2,800. Then to do the efficiency variance, you can fill in standard price, $7.50, times the standard quantity. So what do we think is going to happen for the labor? We think it should take 2.5 hours to make a unit. So when we produce 2,750 units, we think it should take 2.5 hours per. So that means we think it should have taken, okay, so if you multiply in the parentheses, we think it should have taken 6,875 hours. It took more, so we already know that our variance is going to be unfavorable. So if I take the 6,875 hours we thought should have happened, multiplied it by the 750, that's going to give you 51,560, I'm going to round up, $3. So I take the difference in that, the 51,563, subtract from it the 52,500. You've got to have a difference of $937, and again, it's unfavorable because this, multiplying this out, is less than the 7,000 hours that actually happened. So that's how we know that we have an unfavorable labor efficiency variance. So to fill in for your multiple choice, it asks what's your labor rate variance. It's $2,800 unfavorable. And then for your labor efficiency variance, it's $937 unfavorable. We just want to round to the closest, $938. It's within $1. So just a little bit of a rounding issue. So your answer on 10 is going to be B. And then the last question talks about Timothy Company. Same thing. It's wanting us to come up with labor rate, labor efficiency, material price, material quantity variances based on the information provided. So again, to do all your variances, you're simply looking at your 3 columns. 11 and 12 are asking for labor, so we'll start with that in this problem. So we'll just start working with direct labor. 3 columns, actual price times actual quantity. Standard price times actual quantity, and then standard price times standard quantity. We're looking at the labor this time first, so we just want to see what it tells us about labor. It tells us that for the labor, it says 17,300 direct labor hours at $10.20, so that's your actual information for labor. So your actual price is $10.20 an hour. Your actual quantity is 17,300. So multiply that out, and that is giving me 176,460. Standard price. We think for the labor we're going to pay $10.25. Actual quantity is 17,300. So that's giving you 177,325. Subtract that from the 176,460. So that's giving you an 865 labor rate variance, and it is going to be favorable because you thought you were going to pay $10.25. You only paid $10.20, so that is a good thing. So that's a favorable variance. So it is B. Then for the third column, your standard price is $10.25. Now you've got to fill in for the standard quantity. So what you know about your labor is that you thought it would take 5 hours to make a unit. You actually produce 3,500 units. That's just coming from your very top paragraph. So $10.25 times 5 times 3,500 is giving you 179,375. So that's giving you a difference of $2,050. So you've got $2,050 as your labor efficiency variance. Do you want to see if it's favorable or unfavorable? Well, if you simply take 5 times 3,500 in this parentheses, it's 17,500. That's how many hours we thought we should have worked. We actually only worked 17.3, so that's going to be a favorable variance. So your answer on 12 is A. Now we want to do the same thing. Now this time though, we're just looking at direct material. Now notice for direct material, we have the same issue we had in the previous example, in that for direct material, the amount that you purchased and the amount that you used are different. So we want to go ahead and do the direct material price variance first. So price, we're going to use purchased. So we're going to take actual price times actual quantity. So for your material, what you actually purchased was $425 times 12,300. So that's giving you 52,275. And then for your middle column, how much you thought you were going to pay on the material was $450. You actually purchased $12,300. So that's giving you $55,350. So your difference there is $3,075 is your variance. And this is what you thought you would pay. That's what you actually paid. You paid less, so it's a favorable. So it's $3,075 favorable variance. So your answer on 13 is D. And then to come up with the usage variance, we have to switch gears now because we've used and purchased different amounts. So now we want to use the amount of material that was used, which is 11,750. So that's giving you 52,875. Then for the third column, where it's the standard price of $450, now you want to multiply it by how many pounds we should have used. So for the material, we should have used 3.5 pounds for every unit we produced. So 3.5 pounds times 3,500 units means we should have used 12,250 pounds. We used less than that, so we know that the variance is going to be favorable. Multiply that out, you get 55,125. So your variance is 2,250. And again, favorable or unfavorable, you really just go back up and look at the quantities. So if you take 350 times 3,500, so if you go inside these parentheses, that's how much material you should have used. So you should have used 12,250, or that's how much we thought we would have used. We actually only used 11,750, so we were very efficient. So we have a $2,250 direct material efficiency variance. So your answer on 14 is A.